Road St. James and 4 Roads Diego Martin.
Mode Alive.
Farmer Supermarket Santa Cruz.
Sonar Jewelers. Chaguanas and P Now.
Island Hobbies Wrightson Road.
The Express Minimart. Majuba Crossroads.
Stacy Supermarket Toco.
Leo Rain Hardware. Track Creek Road. ADC Supermarket. Arima. Get your tickets now.
Call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802.
I find the vibe and energy as well. Yeah, I liked it.
On WESN, the content capital.
WESN.
A lot has happened just yesterday, and it seems as though we will see the end of the SOEs in sight. However, that's not to say that the story does not continue, to put it lightly. That said, there was another situation that also, I guess, made somewhat of the social media rounds. I already saw, I don't necessarily get a lot of commentary from social media on local events. I guess the algorithm doesn't send it my way unless I look for it. But some stuff happened with regards to U.S.-Caribbean relations to an extent. But before that, I'll get into the sequel to the state of emergency in a bit, in a few minutes. The AG had a press conference yesterday, I believe it was, when this announcement was made. But one of the things that he did say also was that the airstrikes by the United States on suspected drug smuggling was consistent with international law based on advice he received from an international legal expert outside his office. It doesn't say if it's an expert outside the country or if it's an expert within the country. In something like this, I would put a little bit more stock with someone outside the country, not because I doubt our local expertise, but more because this is just not something we would have a lot of experience with. These kinds of questions don't come up that often in TNT. On some level, anyway, let's not throw too much shade at the Coast Guard unnecessarily, because it's not like they're doing anything for us to have those questions. Now, the fact that he got that advice, he sought external legal advice from an international expert outside of his office before coming to that conclusion. So it's not necessarily that this advice was the conclusion. And dare I say, there's no reason to question the capabilities of the Attorney General. That said, I personally would be more comfortable if this was challenged in a court and a judge weighed the whole situation. We got presentations, arguments for and against, evidence for and against, and perhaps even, I don't know, depending on the process, say it go to an appeal, so that it will go through multiple levels. Because the advice of a legal expert, whether internal or external, and the judgment of any lawyer does not guarantee a result, right? Again, this is not to say that I am questioning the Attorney General's capabilities, but rather it's just one of those things where even when the consensus wants to say one thing, the court might come out and say another thing. So, but I wanted to bring it up to highlight, first of all, because when all of this happened, one of our own, Ashraf Ali, tried to explain that international law and the law of the sea is not as straightforward and quite the same as local police rules of engagement and the laws that govern how the police interacts with suspected criminals, etc., etc. It's just not the same, right? I am not an expert, but I know just enough to know that it's going to be more complicated, and to assume that it's going to be like how it is for just police on our domestic streets and how they interact and the burdens of proof that they need to do certain things and the requirements they need to do other things is not going to be quite the same. Then you add into the mix a whole host of other recent legal precedents set by the U.S. administration's predecessors, and things do get a little tricky. It's not just the strikes that has to be potentially cleared up in a more substantial way with regards to the actions themselves, but also a whole host of various other things legally that's tied into it. Now, while that's going on, and talking point, regardless of agreement or disagreement with how things are going on, one of the things that we have pointed to is the fact that we understand if the Prime Minister is looking to secure friendly relations with the current U.S. administration, as opposed to risking contested or less than friendly relations with one of our major trading partners and one of our major security allies when you get down to it, right? It's not as though we could look at regional partners outside of the United States as a major security ally. And now it seems as though, and one of the things that is making it difficult, I think, for the media, and when I say the media, I really mean a lot of the political analysts and international diplomacy, international relations experts to judge a lot of these things on, is the fact that the administration is run by a guy who's not a politician. So how he moves and his pacing, his tempo is not going to be quite the same as other people, right? It's hard to explain in a short time frame, but I just feel like his pace, you know, his rhythms, and his strategies and tactics are not going to be quite the same as the usual. And I've said this before, the mistake is to try to judge him like everybody else, like a normal politician. So we've seen ups and downs in TNT where we got 5% extra on the tariffs, then we got some of the tariff knocked off on certain products which were significant for our exports to the United States. Now we also saw what happened to 3 countries in the Caribbean. One was Haiti, which that might have been with regards to, there was more to it than that. But Antigua and Barbuda, and I believe it was Dominica, I can't remember what the second country was, they had issues because of their citizenship by investment programs that the United States did not like, then saying, well, we don't want to let people in that you are just going to let in because they bought their way in. Now, apparently, the U.S. State Department is pausing immigrant visa processing for 75 countries, including 10 Caribbean countries. Antigua, Barbuda, Barbados, Belize, Cuba, Dominica, Grenada, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The thing is, I know a lot of people want to ascribe, oh, this is the reason why, and I don't necessarily want to do that just yet. I just want to point out that, well, we're not on the list. Can that be, to some extent, somewhat of a benefit or something that you could stick up a feather in the Prime Minister's cap? Maybe. I would lean in that direction right now. Like I said, I don't think we are in a time period where you could just claim Switzerland, not want to take any sides on any issue, and still expect reasonably that everybody will seek to engage with you in good faith moving forward. Because essentially, I fear if you don't pick a side, then you might be abandoned by everybody. I don't necessarily like it. I don't know how bad it could get. It is what it is. So this is why. This is one of the reasons potentially why I have no issue with the Prime Minister engaging with friendly relations with the current United States regime and agenda. I just wish the messaging was a little bit cleaner. A couple of things quick to get through. One, I've said on this show and talking to the TPS with regards to things like home invasions and home break-ins and the like, sometimes it's the mundane things. Don't just go straight to a gun and how you're going to fight off the intruders. Things like lights, things like cameras, and in this case, there's a report in this morning's papers about an air horn scaring off intruders. An elderly lady saw 2 intruders on her home camera systems. So it benefits there. That alerted her to the intrusion into her property. And then she informed a relative that was also there and then took to the air horn to basically sound the alarm to the rest of the community. And apparently that caused 4 individuals to escape her property, to jump over her wall to get away. Which means that, imagine now, if she didn't have cameras to warn her, and if she didn't have something to scare them off, and an air horn scaring people off at times, you know, can be safer than trying to confront them with a firearm. Well, it was 4 against 2, and one of the 2 is an elderly lady. So, it's not, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to work 100% of the time. I am saying, why not give yourself that extra layer? Because you never know which of the criminals might be a coward, and all it might be is an air horn. But once they get to the house, and once they get to accosting you, especially if they do it by surprise. Another thing is, apparently there was another situation with a fraudulent car sale. A couple were robbed after they were met with men who had a fake car deal, right? At least it was only $3,000 in cash, but they were also robbed of the other valuables that amounted to well over $10,000, it seems, because bank cards were taken as well. And also the ID cards and driver's permits were also taken. If those aren't recovered right now, imagine what it's like. So, now with that said, I want to touch on this, so we'll start off today. Might not get into all of it before we welcome our guests, but let's go straight in today's daily review. Talking about daily review on WSN, the Content Capital Show. I'm Michael Small. One of the things that I found interesting that they're deciding to do this now, and that is zones of special operations, apparently, at least to some extent, potentially patterned after similar initiatives in Jamaica, right? I'm not sure if that was highlighted by the AG, but it was highlighted by the media. And their laws, you could find the Jamaican version of the law as is online. I'm not lawyer enough to try to compare and contrast, especially since it'll be somewhat premature. We haven't passed a bill yet. But we had a situation where the government decided to inform us what their intentions were, which that I could appreciate that. In fact, I do believe Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, or I think he's Minister of Legal Affairs, Saddam Hussein, he highlighted that you know, we didn't, I believe this is what he said, something in the effect of, it was not necessary for the government to have to bring this up now, to mention this now, right? And the government's commitment to transparency and accountability, noting, although neither the law nor the Constitution required the media briefing, the administration believed it was important to report to the public on its work and achievements. Now, it was prompted, the SOE, which was prompted by exceptional circumstances, right? I guess now they're looking to, well, this is going to be the sequel. What exactly are the circumstances for this? I'm not too sure if they went into enough detail to really give us a good grasp on what the full extent might be. Now, again, it's going to be debated in the House, so things might change. Giving us the intention up front is a good thing, right? Hopefully, we'll get more details as this thing rolls out, at the very least, when it gets debated. One of the issues, though, is we thought with regards to the budget, we would get more details as the various ministers will make their contribution to the budget debate, and that did not happen, right? And while I don't necessarily anticipate something similar happening here, it's just one of those things where, listen, it might be difficult to live that down. I'm sorry, it is what it is. But I do appreciate the sentiments that the Minister Hussain did express. Now, this is somewhat controversial, at least to some people. So it's very interesting, particularly with the backdrop of our political climate currently, how the response has come out, right? Now, it seems as though this situation, when you kind of just take it on the surface, it sounds a bit extreme because apparently the Prime Minister will have a certain, well, some would argue too much power with regards to these zones of special operations. I just want to get the... So it allows the Prime Minister to declare special zones in TNT where, quote, there are reasonable grounds to believe that there is rampant criminality, murder, gang warfare, high or escalating levels of violence, or a threat to the rule of law and public order, end quote. It is geared to providing for, quote, special measures for upholding and preserving the rule of law, public order, citizen security, and public safety within certain geographically defined areas. And basically, it gives the Prime Minister power to declare high crime communities special zones subject to search without a warrant and curfews, and that period where the curfew and the searching without a warrant powers will last for up to 72 hours. Now, again, there's a lot of questions. Can you have back-to-back declarations? So essentially the 72 hours thing. What's to prevent it from having multiple iterations of 72 hours just back-to-back, so it's not really 72 hours? And note, state of emergency, the president has to declare it. This is saying the Prime Minister gets to declare it. The flip side is, for what this is, that might be more practical. And we, on one hand, have seen situations where this might have been beneficial in the past when we had certain high casualty gun violent attacks. But the response to this, at least in one instance, don't necessarily have time to go into everything, but at least in one instance, someone on social media had this to say. Zones of special operations. So many parallels to be drawn, none of them good. All of them anti-black, anti-poor, anti-working class, all of them leading into tribal polarities, all very MAGA, all very authoritarian, all pro-status quo, all symptomatic of systems of oppression operating exactly the way they have been designed to. Very purposeful slap in the face to the zone of peace. Well, first of all, I don't know why you had to bring the zone of peace into it. That's point number one. And I was never a fan of the zone of peace arguments, but I don't really see what this has to do with that, right? Because the proponents of the zone of peace went to great lengths to say, well, the zone of peace doesn't include crime and domestic violence levels because of crime. So let's not now want to have our zone of peace cake and eat it as well. That's point number one. Point number two, I said yesterday, I don't like it when we go to the extremes. Now in this case, yesterday it was the man with the funny mustache, this case it's MAGA, and that's not necessarily as extreme, but is it very authoritarian? Yes. Here's the thing, if Jamaica has it, right, and you might get some of the same criticisms, anti-poor, anti-working class, very authoritarian, pro-status quo. But will it hit the same there? Some of these arguments, are they hitting the same there as they seemingly, if you just follow the narrative and the emotional response, how they would hit here? Because we do have a different racial dynamic to a lot of other Caribbean countries. And it does open us up to two things. One, actual racial division, and two, the perception of. And granted, our politics keeps, at the very least, the perception of it happening alive. But the flip side is this. On some level, the implication is that our crime levels is based on racial or racism. And I never necessarily liked that argument because it didn't go into a full comprehensive explanation as to why our crime situation is what it is. It is something borrowed from the United States. I don't necessarily like it from the United States either. But the argument up there is not quite the same as the argument down here, right? This, we'll see where it goes. One of the things that I'm afraid of, as proven in the THA elections, is that we might not be debating the actual issue. We might be going to narrative debates, which are more based on emotional arguments. Now, to what extent are these arguments presented here emotionally charged to try to get a reaction from the public, and to what extent are they based on actual practical points of discussion and debate that we should hash out, right? Because where did I go? I went to some of the more practical things of, well, how is this going to work? But this argument here doesn't actually describe the measure and why the measure is what it is. It just tells you what to think of the measure. Not saying that they're wrong, but such an incomplete argument like that, I have a hard time fully accepting it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue conversations, continue the breakdown of the election, and maybe get into some of the whole public perception of what's going on domestically and maybe internationally. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Hello.
Welcome to Cover Star. This is Advanced Dynamics, where it all happened, the scene of the crime. For 4 days in December, this 22 by 30-foot studio turned an idea on paper into real-life reality TV. When these doors were shut behind performers, it was truth time. No audience, no applause. Just the cameras, the crew, and the ones who comment. Our mission is simple. Bridge generations and genres. Jog our collective cultural memory. You're inside Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice. On WESN, the content capital.
The countdown has started for the biggest raffle ever in Trinidad and Tobago on behalf of Queens Royal College, valued at just under $1 million for 3 brand new vehicles. First prize is a luxurious Ford Ranger. Draw date is Saturday, January 24th at the college. Tickets only $100.
Final purchase date for physical tickets is this coming Monday, January 19th.
No further extensions. You hear? Some ticket outlets include islandetickets.com,
Legends Sports Bar, Point Fortin,
6 Liquor Mart, Barnes Road,
Mileage Mac, Port of Spain and San Fernando,
Pitt Street Market, R.A.P. Avenue,
Mepco, Marabar,
Tony's Hardware, Belmont,
Shane's Supermarket, Aruca,
Hot Shop, Mukarapa Road,
St. James Pharmacy, opposite the Police Barracks,
Anderson Fashion, opposite City Gate, Icebox, Riverside Road, Current,
Gabby Discount Hardware, both outlets,
Color Shop, Diego Martin and St. James,
Juma Supermarket, Valencia,
MS Food City, Tebe,
Mirage Supermarket, Paget Main Road. Get your tickets now.
Call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put
Why
forever.
you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here on Talking Point on the content capital, WESN, and joining me is someone that is no stranger to the network, although this is his first time on Talking Point. To join me, looking quite dapper and making me look like quite the scrub, I am speaking of National Youth Advocate Nikolai Rampasad. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for bringing me. Yeah, it's first time on Talking Point.
Yes. So and this it's kind of late because we did say after the budget you want our budget breakdown show on the night. You know, we need to see more of you. But hey, better late than never, because something big happened, and I don't know if you were, you're signaling your appreciation.
Maybe wrong choice of colors this morning.
So, of course, the THA election results, this is one of those things where it's causing me to look at the last, say, 5 years or so of the Tobago politics with a slightly different lens, especially with what happened with the general, because it feels even more so that the situations are connected. What did you make of the fact that the TPP won? That was kind of assumed to be a given, right? Yeah. But to take all of the seats, somewhere close, the one lone PNM elected council, he only lost by 17, and from what I have read this morning, I just skimmed through it, they lost the recount, right? So it's not to say that it was like a landslide to a complete degree, because there were some close races, but 15-0.
Yeah. 15-0, as I'm hearing in these spaces as we came out of the THA elections. My thoughts, I'm quite surprised that he did not retain his seat, given the last instance where he was a lone representative of the People's National Movement. My thoughts on this is this a signal due to the transition of leadership within the party? Is there fallout? Is the executive
this
not...
Is the PNM?
The PNM, that is, right? Is the executive not settled within their parties? Because as we know, the PNM has a Tobago Council. So is it that there was a lack of cohesion between both the Trinidad Central Party and the Tobago Council? Because we did see opposition leader in Tobago helping campaigning, right? One would have suspected that then it may have boosted some of the votes. When you look at the breakdowns in the figures, they may have boosted, but we did not see that, right? So I think that for the TPP, and then we had Mr. Watson Duke endorsing them fully. Quite surprising, yeah.
Well, with the PNM, because like the general, this is one of the things that makes, in hindsight, now I want to apply it more to the general as well, right? Yeah. The low voter turnout. Yeah. Now, in the case of the UNC, they did get an increase between where they were from the election previous to the last general election. With the TPP, I don't think you could say that they got an increase, right? So it kind of tracks similarly with the PNM. They lost voters in both instances. But with the TPP, they potentially also lost voters. The theory on this show is complacency, right? Would you agree?
Well, I think, this is my opinion, of course, when I thought the same thing in terms of when I saw the figures released by the EBC in the last THA elections compared with this one, right? Could one suspect that the TPP, which was formerly PDP, and then they would have branched off forming their own party. Tobagonians needed a little time to see, okay, how would they fare against a PDP-born party? And now they have seen this, and now they say, okay, let's take a chance and give them another 4 years or so. So I think it was Tobagonians on the side of erring on caution, but also indicating that based on performances thus far and promises made for future, that they want a TPP-led THA legislature, and they are somewhat pleased with the performance of the Executive Council.
Yeah, I think ultimately I can't really say, oh, the TPP did bad things, right, and the PNM didn't. Or rather, like there's specific controversies that you could point to the TPP and say, oh, look how much worse it got compared to that. You can't really say that. It seemed as though, and ironically, this is where the PNM's policy might have worked against them. The shackles and the constraints and the limitations that they had in for the PNM, it was more or less, it caused the TPP to conduct operations more or less in similar ways. You know, it wasn't like they had a lot of room to cut. So things didn't necessarily on certain levels change that much to say, oh, well, look at what they did wrong and this project bust. No, their complaint is we don't have the budget for a project. We can't really make much changes. And they had the same budgetary levels of the PNM, but when you break it down, it's like, yeah, we have like a few million for development work, and that's really not enough. So I guess now with the budget allocation, some might think is one of those indicators where, look, unfortunately, this could be where the Tobago Council is kind of paying the price because they're linked to the central government that was giving them that minimal budget all the time.
And that's a really interesting point, because we have to also remember when the PNM administration, when they were in office, you had a prime minister at that point in time in the form of Dr. Keith Rowley, who was Tobagonian, and then you had two Tobagonian MPs who were both ministers as well. And one can argue that Tobago should have seen a certain boost in development, because they had at least 3 high-ranking ministers, born and bred Tobagonians, right? And I think the argument can be made that Tobagonians felt that they did not get the level of representation and development that was needed, or the attention that was needed at a cabinet level.
I think I don't know to what extent Tobagonians will hold this against the PNM, but it's hard not to forget Shamfa Cudjoe when she looked at the central range of Tobago, which would have been in her counterpart's constituency, and says, nobody lives there. And I'm just like, that is not something to say. But to your point, the last PNM Prime Minister of any substantial length of time, yes, technically, Stuart Young was Prime Minister for 6 weeks. It's hard to say now. Dr. Keith Rowley, for 10 years, the last Tobago Prime Minister, for 10 years, and yet Tobago kind of felt neglected. That's my read on it as a non-Tobagonian. It almost feels as though this result has nothing to do with Penelope Beckles at all, right? Despite the fact that, as you said, she went to campaign. I didn't know that, but to me, and to what extent does a Trinidadian politician really help, right? When they go, Dr. Rowley is different. He is a born and bred Tobagonian, right? To me, this is just the latest bad outcome that affects his legacy and is affecting his party. And that's why I say it's a continuation of the general, because the previous leader of the Tobago Council, Ansel Dennis, he came out of the last THA election.
Yes, he did.
And he was essentially from the previous regime. He was not selected by the current opposition leader, by the current political leader, or the process that selected him did not take place alongside the process to select a new executive for the PNM. So it's kind of weird, but this is the last holdover of that time period, and I guess perhaps the Tobago voters were more cognizant of it. It's like, why do we want to go down this road again?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I think he did indicate that he would be stepping down. He's resigning as a political leader of the Tobago Council. I think that when I viewed some videos on social media where persons who are aligned to the People's National Movement are now speaking out against what we say. I would say there's a little bit of instability internally.
I saw one resignation published by a media house.
Yes. And so is it that internally, no, I can't speak for what happens the inner workings of that particular party, but is it that internally there is some friction where there are persons still aligned to former Prime Minister Stuart Young, some not in support of the current political leader and opposition leader Penelope Beckles? Is it that is what is going on? Is it that there are executive members that are clashing? We don't know.
Well, there's also the internal Tobago stuff as well.
Yes, right. We saw that the TPP campaigned on the self-governance of Tobago, pushing harder for self-governance. So I think that is a promise that Chief Secretary Farley Augustine is going to have to make word on, because he campaigned heavily on that. But you're quite right in the sense of that until then has been the last of the Keith Rowley era in terms of the executive level of the PNM to now having resigned coming out of this loss.
You mentioned that you were surprised Kelvin Morris lost because he was the one holder, and again it was close. Do you think it was a mistake? Because when they lost the last CHA election and they had to reconstitute the executive, despite the fact that he was elected, he was not included in the leadership of the Tobago PNM. He is the one guy. And when it was 33-3, the new political leader of the PNM was one of the three, not somebody that lost their seats, right? So do you think that had also something to do with it? Not so much that Kelvin Morris should have been the leader, but because it kind of gives me shades of the whole Stuart Young transition as well. People kind of saw this dysfunction or what could be perceived as dysfunction, and they're like, I'm not ready to risk this.
Yeah, well, we could suspect, by the default, he was the minority leader in the legislature. I think when you have him holding that position of minority leader and then not holding any kind of leadership position in the PNM Tobago Council, it makes you wonder what is really going on behind the scenes. Is it that he was not selected? Is it that he did not offer himself up to take up any leadership position? So we're not sure. And
that's fair.
We're not sure. So it boils down to now, where do they go from here? Do they rebuild? Now that the political leader of the Tobago Council has resigned, we saw a social media officer also tendered a resignation. We are not sure how many resignations are going to follow. Would that now open up a power vacuum? And who knows, maybe he may throw his hat in the ring. But I don't suspect that it would have caused such a ripple effect to have him lose his seat. I think maybe the district that he served in maybe was dissatisfied with his performance.
Well, post-general, a lot of people, and I think rightfully so, wanted to see the PNM kind of internalize the loss and make adjustments to how they communicated, right? And kind of show the public, hey, we're moving on. We're acknowledging the loss. We're acknowledging all of the things that the public held against us. And we're going to have that in our communication. And I'm not saying that the Tobago Council, the PNM, or the former minority leader did this, because I didn't necessarily follow them as closely, right? But we got that from the national level of the opposition party, where and people have pointed out even recently on the show, they're giving criticisms on issues that you could trace back to their time in office.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you're not necessarily seeing that shift of we were in government, we're no longer in government, now we're in opposition.
Their narrative, I must say, has been as though for the last 9.5 years that they were in the opposition, because when they're shifting the blame game here now. And I recall when the former Minister of Education is pointing out little gaps with the current Minister of Education, and we have to realize that they only just assumed office. These gaps that you're pointing out were while you were in the seat of minister, right? So we have to, I'm quite perplexed as to why, when you do trace it back, like you rightfully said, it's traced back to the time you were in office.
So to what extent could that have also kind of gone against the one PNM incumbent? Because I guess, unfortunately for him, whether rightfully or wrongfully so, he's guilty by association.
Yes, he is guilty by association. I think maybe persons can pick the sense from the nonsense, right? As long, yes, we have party politics, but persons can clearly see that you're just blaming for blaming's sake. And I think that was one of the reasons the PNM did not look as a viable option in Tobago. I think that in Tobago was particularly, the Tobago Council of the PNM was particularly stagnant throughout the tenure. Even though they had one person in the legislature, the wider party, where was Mr. Ansel Dennis? Where were all the other proposed councillors or candidates that were going up in this THA elections? Were they on the ground building the base, building that support? So come this THA election, they would have had a base to work with. We didn't see that. So I think all of that factored in, coming out of the general election, coming out of the PNM going into opposition, into a THA election where there was not a lack of support and that building of connections with the population of Tobago and the proposed candidates of the PNM Council, Tobago Council.
So before we get into moving forward for the TPP, last thing on the PNM, Dr. Mohammed disagree with me because I think he wants to be a bit more reasonable.
Right.
But I just instinctively have this fear that if you don't stop the bleeding now, you should have stopped the bleeding after the general, and you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? And that could have compounded this result. But if you don't stop the bleeding now, the PNM, and just like 2 years ago, last year, they were still talking about, look at our legacy and however many years and the history of the party and great is the PNM. But we're seeing like essentially successive strings of defeats politically. I don't know if this is as far as they're going to fall. I think they potentially may fall further. And with regards to Tobago, I wonder if, it won't necessarily be that difficult to have a future not too long from now where there are going to be two parties contesting the THA, and it's going to be no Trinidad party contesting the THA.
Yeah. Well, we see time and time again the incumbent, the UNC that is, they don't contest Tobago in general, nor THA. What's noticeable in this THA elections is we realize that the Prime Minister did not veer into any campaigning, into any sort of endorsement of the TPP. So I found that very interesting because if you recall, many cycles ago when it was, I think, Ashwood Jack.
Yes.
Right?
Well, I mean, it was a more formal coalition then.
Yes. We saw the Prime Minister spend some significant time in Tobago back then when she was Prime Minister. And I think persons would have argued that because of the Mr. Jack's party being so closely aligned with current central government, his party paid the price for their sins, so to speak.
And which is interesting because I think I would speak for myself and I'm asking you, the TPP's 2 seats aligns themselves in Parliament with the government, yet right. I don't necessarily see them as, it's a coalition government.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see the same way?
Yes, I do, because I think they still have that freedom to consult with their political leader to say, okay, Chief Sec, this is the way the government is going to go on this particular topic. Where do we stand? So I think it's that the relationship is how does Tobago benefit, so to speak, seeing that they are the 2 Tobago MPs. I think they are very Tobago first in their approach to that alignment sitting, because what we call it in the Parliament has the minority opposition. because there are 3 parties within the chamber.
Right.
And there is, like I said, no official coalition or arrangement, but they have chosen to be on the government side. So I think it's a very Tobago first approach in their case, and so far I have not seen any instance where they have voted against the government. They have supported the government, everything that has come through the parliament thus far. I think that would continue. I think with this 15-0 election result, I think we could possibly see a very close not alignment, but a close working relationship between central government and now this TPP.
So that's what's interesting to me, because if you go by the numbers, from the general, I would have thought it would have been closer and 2 seats would have made a big difference, because that's essentially margin from the election before that in 2020.
Yes.
Of course, the UNC, they won enough that they didn't need the Tobago seats this time.
Yes.
But I feel as though the Prime Minister, despite the fact that I don't think she has long-term career aspirations to hold on to the political leadership for any significantly period of time after this term, she is thinking long-term in the sense of, hey, we didn't need the TPP today, but we might need them within the next 4 years and 3 months, 4 months, right?
Yeah.
And it seems as though one of the few times I am seeing a clear long-term decision politically in that, hey, let's hold on to this relationship now. Let's not just, the temptation is, well, we don't need you, we don't really need you.
Yeah.
So we discard you one time.
And what I'm pleased to see, and you're quite right, they're looking long term. Yes, they have short term goals, but the relationship that they're trying to foster between the current administration and the TPP is yes, we're in this for the long haul. Your support is valued, your contributions are valued. Even the collaborations when they were doing the consultations for the stand your ground legislation, we saw that even TPP, the 2 MPs would have hosted their own consultations in Tobago.
Well, and on some level, that's the correct choice, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, because it's their support, it's not a UNC base.
That's right. So we see that there are areas of collaboration, and I am quite pleased to see the collaboration, that it was done not because you're beholden to a party, but you're done because it's you are looking at a people-first approach. And I think that is what I'm very happy to see thus far with the different public consultations taking place. That is something I think we needed more of.
Now, here's the rub. I think now that it's 15-0 and you have the 2 seats in Parliament, the TPA has nowhere left to go. They have more or less won everything that there is to win in Tobago.
Yeah.
You have the relationship with central government. And as you said, they campaigned on autonomy, right?
Yeah.
Which technically they also campaigned in the last THA election.
Yeah.
But that was a funny situation where both parties campaigned on the issue,
Yes.
right? But at least with the TPP, they could say, we don't have central government backing us up, right? Why didn't the PNM deliver on it when they had both bodies, right? Can't necessarily say legislative, but both bodies for overlapping over the course of almost a decade, right? Now we kind of have to see the follow through. And if the relationship could stand up to what could be a situation where now you have the interests of Tobago that the TPP has to follow, and of course central government trying to manage the national situation on the whole, because it's legislation that has to change, but also financial considerations as well. And you don't have a PNM to kind of say, well, they're in the way anymore. And this could be where that relationship might now start to actually get tested with something more substantial.
Yes, it would, because now there's no minority in the council in Tobago. It's fully...
I'm confused as to how that's supposed to work, because I thought there was a mechanism, but apparently I could have misread it from 4 years ago.
Well, coming out of a press conference that the AG spoke at yesterday, they are going to Parliament tomorrow, I believe, to do some amendments to the THA Act to allow for more secretaries, and I think something to do with the quorum as well. So we will await to see what comes out of that. to allow, like you say, I'm not too familiar. I thought that there would have been a mechanism in place for a clean sweep, but we are waiting to see.
I thought there was a way to get appointed councillors, is it councillors that are appointed, more to try to compensate, but maybe I just misread it, or maybe it was on the table when they made the changes from 12 to 15, but it didn't necessarily put it in place.
So we are waiting to see that, but you're quite right, and now the ball is in the TPP's court, so to speak, because they have no solid opposition, so to speak, except now in Trinidad, the main PNM party to come and
but they have such a majority in Parliament.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's not a simple majority. And I guess this is where, however, there's this weird thing where Tobago autonomy is dependent on a body made up mostly of non-Tobagonians.
Yeah, that is the case. I know it is a 3/4 majority is required because we're going to be amending the constitution when we bring up Tobago's autonomy. So
I think they have 3/4.
They would have it in the House, I believe, but the Senate, Senate is where it would be a little more...
Where you need the independent senators.
Yes, so there is where it gets a little tricky in terms of when you're trying to pass things. We have to gain the support of the independent bench. So the relationship will be tested. We are waiting to see how the relationship will blossom. We know in politics, 1 minute you're all good and the next minute you're not. So they have to play their cards right. They have to foster this relationship. I see the current government willing to work and having an open door for this party. And they also appear willing to work with the government. So we are waiting to see how it works. We're not even 1 year into post-general election.
Yes.
So things are still being fleshed out. I'm pretty sure that conversations taking place behind closed doors. So we're waiting to see.
And the radar was not an issue.
No.
Despite the fact that the chief sec had some questions, had some concerns. He did it publicly. But I actually like the fact that he was able to not just conform to the alliance and not say anything publicly. And hopefully, the working relationship continues, because the political relationships seemingly more often than not are very fragile.
Yeah.
And I think anytime you could see some level of disagreement but still able to work together, it's a good thing. And hopefully you'll see more about that, because then it's more about constructive disagreement than...
I think it comes to the political maturity of the Prime Minister as well in terms of her leadership, because I know she was asked when he expressed his views on the matter. She was asked by reporters and she said, well, he's entitled to his opinion. She doesn't share the opinion. And she was very respectful, even though she disagreed with what he said. So I think it speaks to her leadership, her time in service in the arena. And then I also think it was very politically mature of the chief sec as well. Like you said, to come out and say, look, I wasn't aware I'll have to speak with the Prime Minister. So I think he did, instead of going in for a tit for tat, well, I should have been informed and taken a very
aggressive?
Yeah, aggressive and bold approach. He was quite honest, quite simple. I'm sure they would have had conversations privately after that point, but he was honest with Tobagonians. And I think that was a key aspect in this election.
Because, essentially they would have been asking him.
Yeah.
And he would have said, well, I don't know.
Yeah, and that was the honest answer at that point in time. And I think that is what politics on the whole should be, where we're not spinning, topping mud and trying to fabricate nice answers on paper and on television, but being open and honest with the people when we can.
Now, let's transition to the next part, because this does interest me, because I myself find this show and people on this show in the middle of it, right? And the media generally is in the middle of it. And I do think at times it's unfair, because I don't, at least before I would have said that most media houses don't have an agenda. Well, it's hard to say that. It's hard to say that right now, right? But I won't get into that. That said, when the PNM selected Ayla, let me use this as an example.
Right.
It didn't take long for me to come out with a negative opinion of her job performance. And I actually had callers on the show saying, give her a chance, give her a chance, give her a chance. But my issue was, If she was in charge of the TT post, give her a chance.
Right.
If she was in charge of some kind of clerical service, administrative, public service, fine. But the responsibility level of her position was that we can't wait and see. To some extent, it's a results-based situation.
Yes.
Where if, you know, how many deaths are we going to wait, because the gun violence was escalating around that time, and you know, so I didn't necessarily want to have patience, not because I wanted to be unfair, but because the requirements of the situation I felt were more pressing.
Yeah.
And I saw enough and heard enough to say, I don't like what I see and I don't like the situation. And actually one of my callers had to come back and say, you know what, you're right. Now, to be fair to the caller, that's the benefit of hindsight, right?
Yeah.
I did rush my judgment. It's not like I had extra information to make it that the public didn't have.
Yeah.
Now we're in a situation where, granted, we're about 8 months out, right? So maybe it's no longer the early phase.
Yeah.
But I did remember when the opposition tried to say, the honeymoon is over. I'm like, time out. You don't get to say when the honeymoon is over, right? The situation was bad going in. We knew it was bad going in because at times I would try to tell people, don't fully blame everything on the PNM because there are a lot of external challenges. And that's not going to go away because we voted somebody else in.
Yeah.
So now we've reached the point where it's a similar situation. On what level do you have to be fair, because you can't literally make changes overnight and make improvements overnight and change foreign food importation bills overnight, right? Yeah. But the flip side is the level of responsibility. If the commissioner had a severe level of responsibility, well, cabinet is the ultimate responsibility. So what do you make of how people have been either criticizing the government or even supporting the government in the last 8 months?
Yeah, I definitely think that decisions can't be made overnight. We can't expect things to happen in snap of a finger. I think we also have to understand as well, right? This is some of the ministers that we have, they are very new to holding ministerial portfolios. We have the veterans who would have served as ministers in the last UNC coalition in 2015, thereabout.
Which there don't seem to be that many of when you think about it.
That's right. So it's a new cabinet, so to speak. New persons taking over ministerial portfolios. Now remember, this isn't running a business. This isn't running a shop around the corner. This is you're responsible for billions of dollars. You're responsible for public policy. You're responsible for different divisions under you. And remember, there is no, so to speak, orientation for when a minister assumes office. You have to get in there. You have the permanent secretaries and the executive come trying to get you caught up to speed as soon as possible, but you basically hit the ground running. We also have to take into consideration there was a realignment done where ministries would have merged, some would have been separated. All of these things, they affect the workflow of the ministry, how much the ministry could function, because administratively, staff is being split, ministries are being relocated, you have to get new staff, you have to fill positions, all of these things financially. Because of the realignment, the monies that were budgeted and allocated to ministries that no longer exist. So all of these technical things that require amendments, legal requirements have to be met, all of these things. I think we shouldn't rush to judgment. Like you rightfully said, we knew what the situation was to a certain extent as we entered into the last administration and the transition into a new government. And I find sometimes, I think Trinidad, the country is a little overcritical of the government, and there have been some wins, so to speak. We saw public servants getting a substantive amount of their back pay for the Christmas period. We saw that they brought the stand your ground legislation. We saw that they're trying to improve public policy. They're trying to centralize payments, all of these things. So I think we need to, as a public, sometimes we are overcritical.
But this is the flip side, and I started saying this almost from the beginning, because I said the last government had a perception deficit. The police service also as well, and you could argue other aspects of national security, right? And you could go into customs and now licensing divisions, and these things pre-existed the administration. But on some level, and I said it might not be fair But unfortunately, the public has this sense of, hey, all of these road traffic tickets and all of these new customs and excise and everything, they nickel and diming us, because that's the perception of these types of things even before. Some of it created by the opposition when in opposition, but even before the UNC opposition of the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of it is just the holdover of how people perceive these things. So now that you're coming in, the public is having a negative response, and I feel as though some of the negative response could have been headed off at the pass if you were more careful with the communication. This is where being an experience comes into play. But then now, to counter the counter, I do suspect a lot of people wanted to see fresh faces, or they approved of the fresh faces in cabinet, even if they didn't have that affirmative desire beforehand, right? So unfortunately, this is a thing that I think a lot of people were happy to see, and it's not necessarily that easy to say, oh, fresh blood. Well, inexperienced blood, and it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. I think coming into a ministerial portfolio, having not held one before, it's quite an adjustment, especially if you were employed in the private sector beforehand, coming into leading a government ministry. Private sector and public sector are two totally different things in terms of working, and especially on a ministerial level. And then understanding the relationship between the minister and the permanent secretary, and how these relationship goes and how they work hand in hand. So I think, that new faces, great, because with new faces come new ideas, new innovation, new policies, new perspectives. I'm all for it. But it also, each minister has to find their own footing and chart their way forward. Some ministers may be able to work all day and rest all night. Some ministers may be able to work all throughout the night, all day, all night. So they have to find their workflow, find their footing, and how they navigate their ministerial responsibilities, because we have to also understand it's not just ministerial responsibilities. They're beholden to the cabinet, they're beholden to parliament, the sittings, they're beholden to different committees of the cabinet, and then we also have a government who is vastly trying to explore options to move us away and diversify the economy away from energy into other aspects of diversifying the economy. So we saw a ministerial delegation headed traveling recently. I believe the Minister of Works and Infrastructure, Minister John, she just returned back from another trip. So we see the government there working. So I just think it's a period of time to really set. And like you said, we haven't reached the 1 year mark as yet. We're past the early stages, but we haven't reached the 1 year mark, and there's still a level of settling.
For people who might think I'm being soft on Nikolai on the issue, just note that a lot of my criticisms of the government is not the decisions, and you could trace this back all the way to maybe, after the first press conference, because they didn't really do anything policy-wise until then. A lot of it was the communication and the implementation. Like others, it wasn't that they were wrong to shut down CPEP or wrong to do something about CPEP. It was kind of like the how it was communicated and rolled out and stuff like that. That said, one of the things that bothers me, and I think the politicians take their cues from the public, I fear maybe they might be over-indexing on the loudest voices. And the loudest voices at times are the extreme voices, right? For better or worse. Because there are, when you look at some of the corners of the internet and the local, domestic, political internet, as well as depending on where you go and who you speak to, you can get some very colorful language that makes some of the things that people are aghast that are said in Parliament. Oh, Stuart Young said this, so and so said that, and then you can see some stuff online that makes that look like child's play, right? And then also the fact that you will have people, whether they are for the government or against the government, there's a level of bias in the sense of, because I picked my side, I cannot be positive towards the other side or negative to my side in any way. It must always be binary. And that's driving, to some extent, some of the opinions, because there's some things I criticize the government for. There's some things that I don't criticize the government for and believe is correct.
Yeah.
And then when people hear the latter, they're like, oh, you are a UNC fella,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or they hear the former, oh, you're a PNM fella.
Yeah.
And it's like...
So I think that level of bipartisanship is what we need to foster in Trinidad and Tobago politics. I mean, politics around the world,
yes,
it isn't the bipartisan nature of politics has more or less disappeared. So I think if we can develop bipartisanship, and I think when we look at the joint select committees of the parliament, I think that is one of the aims of the parliament, to take away party politics and government opposition, and you have just members of the joint select committee serving and trying to be able to work together. I think what I should say it like this, a lot of arrangements are made behind the camera between the government and the opposition, and the public doesn't see it.
Right.
And what people see is when the camera is on and they're in the chamber and they're throwing jabs at each other. That is what the public see, and that is what some persons believe. But for others, and for us who are familiar of the government sense and what takes place in the parliament behind closed doors and whatnot, you know that it's a performance in front of the cameras. And I think it needs to be where our politicians, our government, our opposition, those in these political spaces, get that level of political maturity to be able to support one another when the right thing is done. And us as citizens being able to speak freely, but also to take responsibility in what we're saying and hold the government to account, and then also being able to know that what the opposition is saying is not correct and hold them to account as well. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you see statements are being made and you know it's factually incorrect, but the same nature, the principle you're talking about, you're beholden to this party, so you can't,
yes,
you know?
Yes.
I think we as citizens, as persons who belong to whatever political party you ascribe to, have that responsibility.
I think one of the things that I lament is the fact that, at least in the previous period, there were a few people who I could have identified on either side where you could see they're not going to disagree with their party, but they know not to necessarily go and say all of the things that everybody else is saying, because they know better. Some of these things we can't say like that. You know, if it will come back to haunt us later on down the line, right? Whatever factual inaccuracies you have, or if narratively you're going too far, it will be used against you because people will remember.
Yeah.
And my concern is, especially now, particularly, take it however you want to say it, what comes to mind more is on the opposition side. In this case, where, you know, what is the argument at times, right? Oh, Keith Scotland, for one presentation, gave a very good breakdown and an argument that had nothing to do with Bmobile and politics, right? I think it was with Justice of the Pieces. Whether you agree with him or not, the point is, I highlighted that to say, hey, this is how it should be, right? But the flip side is some of his comrades on his side of the aisle, at times you see, yes, it's hard not to think of it as grandstanding, and it's one thing to do that on a political platform, it's another thing to do it in Parliament. And dare I say, but again, I come back to how much of it is because the base is encouraging that, or saying we want that, or rewarding that, which is why I say we have to reward politicians for when they do things that we like responsible communication, highlight the good so that they get the signal, hey, do more of this. Because if you just leave it to the base, they want a war, and they want victory, not good governance.
Yeah, but at what cost? So is it that we're sacrificing good governance for banter?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate to say this because you see it, I think, in America as well.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's not about what good governance is. Right? If a Democrat says something has a position on something, right? Republicans are going to go against it.
Yeah.
Right? And they're look, you don't have to like Trump, but his stance on immigration was technically an inherited one.
Yeah.
Right? Obama said similar things before, but because Trump says it, and there's a whole baggage with Trump, and politicians with baggage, they have to understand that they have baggage. If they don't, it is what it is. That's your fault. That's not everybody else's.
Yeah.
You know, now it turned into, well, this is wrong and this is bad and whatever, all of a sudden, right? Because he said it. And I guess on some level, that level of, we're not really looking at the issue, we're looking at the political fight.
Yeah.
Because it's not about how to improve things, it's about my side winning.
Yeah.
And I feel as though, and you saw this with the last administration, the current administration has to be careful that they don't go further down this road, because it's already very easy to be disconnected to the man on the street when you have all this staff and all this responsibility and you can't experience it for yourself. That disconnect, the public will perceive it.
Yes. Yes, yeah, it's true. I often recall, and I even told, I met Minister Swartzing at some functions, and I told him this. I would often see Minister Swartzing walk to meetings in the vicinity of Port of Spain. He's based at the Twin Towers, and he would walk through Brian Lara Promenade. You see him on the street, and quite casual. I mean, he's in his suit, and he has his secretary and whomever with him.
And security, right?
Well, I don't know if those persons are security, but I can't say. But
somebody's probably being stressed out. Yeah.
But I remarked this to him in a conversation. I said, you never saw that. You don't see those things anymore. To have a minister just casually walking through, to have the Minister of Finance go in a mall to buy food on a lunchtime.
And I think it's both. You, at the very least, you could see a little bit on the ground as you walk, but also to me, in my mind, I'm like, I am not going to waste the gas and try to get into to go from here to there.
Yeah, and
I could appreciate that.
Yeah, and whether it was a perception, it was planned, or what, but whatever it was, to see a minister of government just casually walking by in the execution of their official duties, that alone to me as a younger person speaks volumes. I felt with the last administration, it was hard to get into contact with the ministers unless you see them in a political meeting or event or conference or something like that. And that should never be. Because you have to also remember, most of these ministers are members of parliament. So that is something that is part of your job, not just outside of your constituency day, but you also have to connect with the people. That's how you form good governance and good policy.
You mentioned the fact that their working days could be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
I firmly believe constitutional reform to separate the executive and the legislature.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
This has been something that has, as a younger person, this has been something that I have advocated for in the various spaces I sit in. I know the schedule of a minister, I know the schedule of a permanent sec, the executives of a ministry, but more so, let's speak to the ministers, right? It is ridiculous. You're not off at 4 p.m.
Right.
Your day doesn't stop. You are on call 24/7. You travel, whether it be nationally, regionally, internationally, for extended periods of time. You get called with the cabinet, you get called to the different committees of the cabinet, you get called to parliament, all of these things. And it's normal for these are human beings. Of course, they're going to be tired. And we need to expect that. I firmly believe that ministers of government should not be MPs. There should be a total separate. We have the parliament, we have the MPs, right? And they reach out to the constituents, right? And then the MPs in turn work with the government, and you form policy to govern the country.
Yeah, because in England, when you have like 600 MPs, and it might be 20 or less members of cabinet, it's not quite the same as now.
But when you have a particularly smaller parliament like we do, and you have basically every member or every ministerial member being an MP at the same point in time, and we also have to remember, okay, minister, the AG is not an MP, he's a senator, but you have these offices, the Attorney General, Minister of Defense, and Homeland Security. These are higher ranking members, Minister of Finance, where their portfolios are very, very heavy. Because sometimes these ministers get called away.
Well, the Prime Minister is an MP. And when you think about
yeah.
it, that is kind of crazy to say, oh, you have to run the country and you have to represent a part of the country.
Yeah.
Right? Just the time frame.
Yeah. So I do think constitutional reform is a topic that I hope that this current administration touches on. They do have a majority in the House. When it comes to the Senate, they'd have to lean on support from the opposition and the independent bench. But I do hope that with a majority in the House, they're able to bring some pieces of amendments to the Constitution that will help change things for the better. Because I do think there are certain aspects of the Constitution that are quite archaic, that we would have inherited from the British, right? So yeah.
And also not just from the British, but they would have made amendments and updates.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of, moving back in, ironically, people want to say, let's cut the string from the colonizers, but we're still using not even their new laws, but the laws when they were the empire, almost, right?
And I mean, what I do see though, and we can't push it on, just sweep it on the rug, but we do see that where the government is tackling certain subjects currently, they are also amending whatever pieces of legislation that govern those particular subjects. So at least we're seeing it's been done in bits and pieces as the need comes about, but we need wider constitutional reform. I do believe that.
Now, one thing though, to kind of maybe change the perspective on this topic.
Yeah.
I made a case to Dr. Mohammed that some of the issues is the fact that you had PNM regimes, rulership. I don't necessarily like to say PNM rule because it's not a monarchy. They have been voted out, especially within the last 30 years or so, right? We've seen much more of a ping-pong situation.
Yes.
But the point is, for the 60-something years, a lot of PNM. So the status quo might be a bit more default along the lines of what PNM policies would be.
Yeah.
And now, if you want to make big changes, and when you have an economic situation like we have currently, little changes might not be enough. You need to make big changes.
Yeah.
That might not go across very well with the public. And on some level, while I don't necessarily agree fully with the measures being done, I did say, I believe yesterday or the day before, look, on some level, this is not going to be painless. You could debate on where the pain is and how the pain is, but to think that it's going to be painless is a bit naive, right? Regardless of who's in power. Because if you want to kind of like hold on to what we have, not really try and fix anything and slowly wither away, that's fine. That's basically a good recipe for our national collapse, right? If that's what you want, then I'm not doing my job, basically. But if you want to see any kind of improvements when times are hard, there's no easy way to fix things when we're already behind the 8 ball.
Let me give you a piece of statistic that I would have gotten a couple of weeks ago. In every dollar that is invested into our country, from every $1, 95 cents from every $1 is reinvested back into subsidies, which leaves us on every 5 cents to use for other areas of government.
That's crazy.
And you know who I got that from? The Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Dr. Swarat Singh, who's also the Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development at a conference last year.
95 cents.
95 cents of every Trinidadian dollar goes back into subsidies that we, the citizens, benefit from. So you're quite right in saying there is going to be it's a teething process. There is going to be a level of discomfort in different areas, but compared to what the subsidies and the things that we enjoy currently still not being affected, we have much to still be thankful for.
Personally, I think I would have preferred to see subsidies cut than taxes and fines increased. But that's just me, right? The problem is, and again, on some level, politicians kind of they listen to the public. They do what the public wants. So what the public wants is don't cut anything. But then you're kind of left with I can't cut everything, but I can't pay for everything, so what am I supposed to do?
Right, and so it's a matter of, okay, we saw, let me bring this example in a recent conversation I had, right? We saw there was a little debate, public debate recently with the coat of arms, where they extended the time period to do the official changing of the coat of arms, right? And then we also saw persons saying, oh, why did they extend the time? What's the reason, right? But then we also saw public servants saying, well, no, I want my back pay in December, as promised, right? But what we also have to realize is the cost to change the coat of arms on buildings, vehicles. We haven't started talking about embassies and high commissions across the world.
Right.
We haven't started talking about stationery. Digitally, we can change it in a matter of seconds. It took 1 day to change across the ministries digitally. We haven't even talked about money, our currency, changing the print on that. We haven't talked about the seals that we seal official documents on, the president seal, the registrar general seal, all these different seals that now have to change. These things cost a significant amount of money. So my point to that, in that conversation was, okay, you want your back pay, but you also want the coat of arms change at the same point in time. What do you want more? You want the money spent on the coat of arms, or you want the money in your bank account for your back pay? Because both cost millions of dollars, right?
Listen, given the fact that there's a delay, maybe we should take this opportunity to look at the new coat of arms. I'm just saying, those 2 pan sticks, I never liked how they look on the pan. I would love for those, you could just eliminate it. I think it would look better. Or at least make it a little bit more, I don't know. I would have preferred if maybe it was only 2 bottom corners.
Aesthetically pleasing.
Yes, it looks like the pan is melting and it's dripping down at the lowest point. Now, that whole thing about the back pay, that's they made a political promise.
Yeah.
Right? And the unions, that's a whole new chapter of it. And I guess this is where, again, I think you could have done these things communication-wise, level with the public up front.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to see more, because the Prime Minister said, well, the coming year, right, we're going to have to hit the ground running.
Yes.
I guess a lot of people is going to be questioning, well, what have you been doing for 8 months?
Well, I think that's where the communication comes in, like you rightfully said. I think communicating what has been happening throughout the last 8 months, and like I touched on earlier, with a realignment with ministries and portfolios, it has not been business as usual. There have been adjustments that are being made, that are still working out. I know for a fact that there are certain ministries who have to get staff, all of these things. There are a lot of administrative arrangements that have to be done. There are positions that have to be created. On all of these things, there are processes in place. You can't just, say, I need a permanent secretary and a deputy permanent secretary now for a new ministry. There's a process in getting those. There's who is qualified to act in these positions, who's qualified to hold these positions. You now have to constitute an entire ministry. Where is the staff coming from? Are you, especially that the Prime Minister indicated she wants to move away from contract employment and regularize current contracted officers into the wider public service.
Which I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying there's pros and cons either way.
Yeah.
And I don't have a strong opinion on what is the right thing to do. So that's a real, interesting test case. Because I'm not saying that it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm not clear, right, what's the correct thing. So it's interesting that she made that choice.
Yeah.
And how could she prevent the bad aspects of it? Because you know what it's like, public servants who get tenure and now it's hard to move on, and then the job performance just flat lines.
Yeah, I mean, but we have to also, there is a reality, I don't know if it's known to the wider public, that there are some ministries that are 95% staffed with contracted officers.
Right. When the flip side is continuity is a hell of a thing when you have that situation.
Right. When we look at short-term employment, when I remember, I believe it was the Minister of Planning and Economic Affairs, when they assumed office, they spoke about some ministries only they were only operating like 23% staffing capability.
Right.
23% staffing capability for a ministry is unacceptable.
I hate to say this, but that is partially because of the budgetary situation and how the previous government managed it.
Yeah.
So I understand from your point of view, the getting the work done, that's crazy. It's just There's no easy solution because the money is going to come from, is going to be taken out of something else.
Something else. And this is the thing. We speak about the long lines and we talk about the attitudes of public servants and why isn't there anybody between 11 to 12?
Well, stick a pin in that. We do have a call from Arima. We'll take the call. I do have something to say about that. Sure. But first, good morning, caller. You on here?
Sure, Michael Small, good morning.
Morning
to you and your guests.
Good morning.
Now, I want to say I appreciate the efforts that the government is willing to entertain with this special operations zone, right?
Okay.
But I want somebody to define for me what is a special operating zone, because if you're looking at crime, right? Murders is everywhere. Home invasions, there's more to the middle class areas. So, if you want to tell me you want to curtail the freedoms of people living, let's say, Israel River, Bitom, or anywhere else in the country as a whole, I want to see the data. Because from where I sit, Valencia, Carapo, Arima, Diego Martin, Conopia, Enterprise, Princestown, Pinal, even the Carcass is murders. Home invasion, the same thing. So I want to believe that the whole of Trinidad and Tobago is going to be a zone, rather than any one particular place. That's the first thing. The second thing too, with regard to the election in Tobago, Mr. Ansel Dennis must realize that he is one of the last bastions of Keith Rowley. And just how Keith Rowley was disposed of, he too will have to follow suit, because they had the time and nothing meaningful was seen or accomplished in that time. The country was just running on neutral or an idle. What I would say though, I would like to see plans in this country where food production, because Minister Kamamara had said it, right? Every dollar of foreign exchange saved is a dollar earned. And if we don't get to take the labor that we have sitting idle right now with these CPF people, and this land that currently have sitting idle there, and get it into production to generate food and bring down the prices, well then we're going nowhere. And no amount of planning to deal with that, because you gotta remember we live in the tropics. So 2 to 1, what would happen to Trinidad should a natural disaster hit us? Have a good day, sir. I listen off here.
Thank you, caller. Well, thank you. I don't want to sound like I'm going against it too much, but if a natural disaster hits us, local food production probably will not be, it's going to damage local food production and will be probably important on some level at that point, right? I think it's more if a natural disaster happens somewhere else that will disrupt the food getting here. So maybe if that's where you're going, that's fine. The problem with food production is who's going to do it, government or private?
Well, just to touch on that point where he said, I think when we look at Ministry of Land and Legal Affairs, we saw they are making a very concerted effort to distribute whatever lands are being owed through the visa program, the currently that were owed to persons. And I think the hopes of that is that when you distribute these packages, land packages that were promised to persons, they now themselves would get into farming, the agriculture side of it. So maybe that.
So the thing is, I think there's going to need a lot of money either 2 ways. One, if it's small-scale farmers, then the infrastructure to support them can't come from them. They won't have the money for that. Or you get major investments in large-scale operations, singular large-scale entities, right? The problem is you don't see the private sector doing that. I don't know why. I thought, during COVID, I'm like, hey, you want to make money? start having more animal agriculture,
Yeah.
right? I mean, cost of steaks, this is not hard. I haven't had a good steak in, I think, like 4 years, right? Because I refuse to spend that much money in the supermarket for one steak. But the thing is, we're not seeing local private sector invest, and to some extent that could be, ironically, because of the foreign exchange situation, they don't want to put more money and then at the risk that they can't take it out.
And
it's a safer bet to go outside.
And this is the thing. The government always talks about PPP, public-private partnerships, right? And the government no government could always foot the bill. It is on, we have to look at our economy.
Right, as the flip side.
Right? We have to look at our economy and what we can do realistically, right? We need this support.
So the thing is, because I made this argument with the refinery, one could have argued, first of all, the fact that they were going to reopen it, it kind of makes the whole, well, the refinery is operating at a loss. No, the refinery was, by accounting, operating at a loss.
Yeah.
Actual operations apparently was not at a loss because you could reopen it and somehow it'll be profitable, right? But I said, even if it was operating at a loss, the foreign exchange I might have earned might have offset, right, whatever financial losses you got. So now with agriculture, a case could be made, look, maybe government should invest if it could have foreign exchange savings. But I would argue, ironically, you might get more bang for your buck investing that money to get the refinery up to scratch than this is Dutch disease all over again, unfortunately. But you know, the amount of earnings you could get might trump the amount of, no pun intended, the amount of savings you would have on the food side.
And could we have not restructured the operations of the refinery?
Listen, that has been a sore spot for about the last year and a half at least. We do have a call on the line, so we have to take the call. Maruga on the line, caller, good morning, you on the air?
Yes, this thing about giving out land and people will get into agriculture. Most of the lands that were allocated for the Caroni workers were given out. You have no agriculture going on it. So giving more wouldn't increase agricultural production. On the Moruga Road, you had some big areas that were cane lands that were given out. What they have on it? Nothing. They leave it. They plant 1 or 2 orange trees. Most of the people sell the holdings to other people to do all kind of foolishness on it, except agriculture. So I do think that by government giving out lands, Caroni lands, and say they will increase agricultural production, that wouldn't happen. Because all where they give out land, all going down day, or going down all by the bullpen. No agriculture going on there, but the people sell it to people who using the land to do other little things like warehousing and all of that. So Trinidadians don't want to work, especially hard work. Agriculture is hard work, long hours in hot sun. They rather to do home invasion and do all those kind of things, but not come to work in agriculture. I from the country, I know all the big estates had to close down, no labor to run them. Cocoa, look like cocoa and coffee used to mine Trinidad before oil became in the early 1900s. All those big estates, 1,000 acres, 1,500, 2,500 acres, all closed down. Nobody working in doing that kind of work because the politicians all start with this, giving people programs that they figured they wanted to live. They want to work 2 hours. To work on cocoa and coffee and citrus, they had to work 8 hours and for small money. So this whole concept of trying to talk about agricultural production, that wouldn't happen. We used to supply geese in England with bananas. We used to export citrus, all them kind of things. If you want to get coffee today, the whole of Trinidad, if you pick the coffee, you can full a van, a little pickup van. And we used to export millions of pounds of cocoa and coffee. We're getting that back. So over the years, the politics spoil everybody. Everybody that you want to live but not work. You want to live in a manner, you want to look this thing with giving car 10-year-old. It's only to crowd up the road, and where they gain money to buy that, where they gain foreign exchange to give the people to bring in this amount of 10-year-old car, what people dumping. So we're doing the whole thing wrong in Trinidad. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. One thing though, to kind of excuse the whole car situation, if the public transportation system isn't really that great, we kind of in a catch-22. That said, I agree with you, but in order to achieve not having our roads congested, we're just putting more cars on the streets, we need to improve the public transportation system. With regards to agriculture, that's why I said investment in infrastructure.
And we, do you, well...
And something to encourage the work.
Yeah, but just to touch quickly before we take down the call, our cocoa is the best in the world. Like there is no argument due to the soil and the climate that it's exposed to, it's grown in. We have our local cocoa being used in some of the best chocolates around the world, and he's quite right.
You would think that when you have a competitive advantage and you can't take advantage of it, something, culture shift.
Yeah.
Stick up in on that. Go on a sunny line. Caller, good morning.
Good day.
Good day, good day.
Sure, you seem to forget when I told you about the refinery.
Yes.
The refinery, the core refinery, never went bust.
But Professor, I basically said that. I did not disagree with that statement, what I said.
No, what caused it to go bust?
Yes, the debt it was saddled with.
Right, that is what Malcolm Jones brought in. Two plants that had been set up in America and wasn't working. And when he decided to bring it in, the permanent secretary, who at that time was a man who came through the ranks in the oil industry and was teaching petroleum engineering at the University of the West Indies, objected to it and said that cannot work. And they still went ahead and bring these two plants. And it's the money that it takes to buy those two plants, the interest on that, that is what caused the ministry to go bust. Right? And that is the problem. Right? It has nothing to do with the core refinery.
Yes.
Now, the problem of opening the refinery, no.
Yes.
I don't know where is the stage with them thing. Because remember, people talk about we was importing oil. You always had imported oil. But the reason was, in Trinidad, we have a set of different types of oil. And each one wants different type of plants.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when we put up a plant, if we have spare capacity, we will import oil for that.
Yeah.
That is not because we don't have oil. It's because that oil is cheaper to bring in. It was a matter of economics. Any questions?
No caller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's why other countries also do that.
Yeah.
Some of the oil from Venezuela is going to Iran. Is like, well, they make oil. Yes, but it goes back to what he said. Different facilities require different grades of oil.
Yeah, I quite agree.
Now, cultural shift needed, but that affects a lot of things. And I'll go back to a point that I believe Arima pointed to. Staff shortages, or you also brought it up. Some areas have staff shortages, and then you have maybe bad customer service. Now, especially if you have staff shortages and long lines, it would be a titan to not have, be abused by irate customers and keep their cool, right? That is a skill. I don't know if we do enough to train our population, and culturally, that's not something that's widespread culturally. It's not just a government thing, it's also in the private sector. Right? So I think there's a lot of things where we benefit from a cultural shift. But I want to go to the situation with the special zones right? Because the first caller brought that up. And I think this is one of those things where it's not a cop-out, it just is what it is. They gave us the courtesy. Again, I mentioned the fact that Minister Saddam Hussein basically made this point. They didn't have to mention it now because it's not a finished product now, but they're telling us the intention now. They're pointing to a basic framework, right? it doesn't, yes, it was reported the Prime Minister will have the ability to just declare it and it'll be that way for up to 72 hours. That doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be at the end. To be fair, you have to wait to see what is passed.
And that's right. And then this is why we wait for tomorrow, where they are going to lay the bill in Parliament. They're going to debate it to see all the provisions, all the clauses, how much authority does the Prime Minister have? Does she work in conjunction with the President? Because as we know, it's the President who issues the proclamation for a state of emergency, right? So we have to look at all of these things when we see what's before us. And I think maybe we could give the government a little props in the sense of they are learning that, okay, let's approach the population. This is what we are proposing. Let's flesh it out at the Parliament. If there are changes to be made legislatively, we'll make those amendments. But let's give them a little warning.
Because we don't know if it's a copy and paste of the Jamaican bill.
But I mean, it's a natural practice for those who, well, for the wider population, when you're doing legislative drafting, right? You look at other jurisdictions to see what is working, what is their law, how it affects them. You don't just copy and paste, because what Jamaica uses for their parishes will be different for our constituencies, right? So we look at different jurisdictions for data, and then we also have to realize that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the CAPA branch, that provides all the data and the analytics for crime and whatnot for Trinidad and Tobago as from the police service, I'm sure the government would be utilizing that information to determine how they draft this piece of legislation.
Now, caller, I'm not faulting you for being wary, because this is something that's essentially, no matter how you spin it, it is reducing the rights of citizens, just in a very limited way compared to an SOE, but it's still something that could have negative consequences down the line. But to judge, though, I did say, what if, what's to stop multiple 72-hour instances back to back? But that is speculative on my part, right? So we have to see even the draft, to some extent, is not guaranteed to be the end product. Because you have to kind of wait on that for the most part. But the conversation could start with the draft.
Of course, because we also have to recognize that the Parliament will go into committee stage to look at clause by clause, and if there are any amendments, this is where the opposition has a chance now to say, okay, we don't like this clause because of whatever the reason may be, and the government could say, okay, we would amend, and we have collaborative effort on both sides of the aisle. So you're quite right. What may be presented tomorrow may not be the final outcome that is passed and then assented to by the President.
Now, the caller brought up something that's very tricky, and it might sound like I'm disagreeing with him, but I'm not actually disagreeing with him. But rather, I'm using it to point out where you could get a major stumbling block. It's kind of similar to use of force policies. Everybody wants, it's either A or B. They want a flow chart that is definitive and absolute. And when you come to a confrontation, a physical altercation, it's subjective. It's based on judgment calls. And the problem with the declaration of a special zone of emergency or whatever, similar to, because I saw a video not too long ago where the police officer kind of used an unfair game as an analogy, in that we can't react all the time, because if I react to a criminal shooting, then regardless of the outcome, that bullet that he shot first could kill somebody. Sometimes law enforcement has to be proactive, has to act first, depending on the level of threat. So with a special zone of emergency, you can't necessarily wait for the statistics in an area to get totally out of control, because then you're kind of coming in hindsight with a Band-Aid, as opposed to trying to prevent the violence and to prevent the injury and death. And that's not a clear-cut thing. That is, in the heat of the moment, judgment call. And here's the sad part. It will be very hard for even the media, right, to properly assess this. You might need, these are the things where the courts with detailed arguments on both sides to come to kind of be in hindsight to give us the final verdict. But to say that in heat of the moment we'll be able to, as members of the public, to assess it when you're not in there and you don't have all the information, it's really hard. The flip side is, I understand, because again it comes back down to, well, we're giving up our rights. Is it necessary? The trick is, sometimes, and I said this about the state of emergency that the current government declared threat against the government. Well, if the state of emergency is successful, you're not going to see the threat materialize, and it's going to look like, well, what's the threat?
Yeah.
When you have concerns about a violent situation in a hotspot and you suppress it with a special zone of emergency, then it's going to look as though, well, why did they bother? Because nothing happened. It's like, that's the point.
Yeah.
On some level, you don't want anything to happen.
Yeah. And we also have to recognize that the information that the government would have, the security services would have, is not the information we would get as John public, right? Because remember, this is national security, so not everything is going to be advertised via press conference and media release. There is a level of confidentiality that has to take place. There's a level of intelligence gathering. So that report, when the president was, the prime minister summoned the NSC at midnight to declare this state of emergency, we would not know, if ever, maybe 10, 15 years down the road, maybe if it's ever released, we might probably know. So there are some aspects of national security we have to be cognizant and have a certain level of trust that they are responsible. I say responsible in the sense of we don't ever want a situation where the government is claiming national security and confidentiality to not make the public aware. But there is a level of confidentiality and due to national security risk that these things are treated with privately.
Now, this is one of the things that I like about the American government, where they have things like the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that is populated by members of both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
Now, we do have our joint select committees, but those seem more like bodies to inquire about things.
Yes.
I'm not saying that the opposition that we should have revelations. And I'm not saying that this is going to solve everything, because you said it yourself, the bipartisan relationships are not there. That said, ideally, we would have a committee where members of the opposition will be read in on all of these things, with the caveat of, you talk and you will get in trouble, because this is national security secrets, right?
Yes.
And I made this point when the PNM was in power. So this is not a thing, no, I'm being very consistent on this, because it's not going to be perfect, because at times you're going to have opposition for opposition's sake. I believe, well, if I didn't say that about the UNC, I would imagine I probably did, right? Because that's where people might say it's the whole. But on some level, you kind of have to put reasonable systems in place and sort out the excess of human behavior somewhere else, right?
And this is where constitutional reform plays a part. Because in the US system, when the president is taking certain actions where it concerns national security, he has to inform what they call the Gang of Eight, which is 4 members on the ruling party, 4 members on the opposing party, the majority and the minority. In that case, it's for both the House and the Senate in their system of government. In our Westminster style of parliament, there are no systems in place where the current government informs the opposition on the daily happenings or operations and the functions of ministries, unless it's through prime minister's questions to ministers, or in a joint select committee, right?
So and that's all kind of after the fact.
That's after the fact. So I agree that there should be some system in place where, when the NSC, the National Security Council, meets and decisions are being made, that the leaders, the respective leaders on both sides of the House and in the Senate, are informed for the sake of information being there, but they don't go to the media now and say, okay, I was called in for a briefing at 12:06 a.m. this morning, and this is what's going on. So yeah, there is the penalty of, okay, this is national security, this is sensitive, but we're informing you this is what's about to happen. And then, even if they are asked by the media, they could then say, yes, we were informed beforehand, and there is operations going on, but after conversation with the NSC and the Prime Minister, rest assured, because we should not be, as a country, and this is where politicians have to be responsible, we should not be using national security and be playing with national security for party politics.
Well, I hate to say this, but the state of the world internationally, I won't doubt that it gets there. I did not like how the whole crime talk situation ended, because I did not feel that there was anybody try to really compromise. That said, and note, this is not to say that the opposition should be in the National Security Council or in any decision-making body. No.
Yeah.
No. That's not practical.
Yeah.
They just need to be informed, but
Yes.
authorization is not needed, right? But they need to be informed. That way, let's just say somebody on the government side looks to break the law, maybe by sending a car complaint to Barbados. Who knows, right? When you have oversight,
Yes.
now at the very least the public, let's just, if there's much to do about nothing, it's better to hear that from the other side than to hear that from your side. Because if you just want to say it's much to do about nothing, why would we believe you?
Yeah.
So that's basically it.
Especially in the instance with the U.S. radar in Tobago,
Yeah.
where we saw many opinions on the opposition side. It's a base, and are we giving up our sovereignty as a Trinidad and Tobago for the U.S.? I even saw where Ministry of Defense had to issue a release because there was a drone shot of the overhead, and that was so practically over the airport, right?
I mean, there's supposed to be a no-fly zone for drones near the airport in general.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things where it's like, careful now.
Yeah, so...
You might lose your visa.
But I do think that I was disappointed with the opposition leader particularly, and I say that because I felt this would have been a moment when she spoke about, when she assumed the position of political leader and opposition leader, she said, I'm not going to oppose for opposing's sake. And I felt as though with the US radar,
it was.
I felt like you knew better.
Here's the thing, though, and I said this for the government, and I'll say it for the opposition leader. This is unprecedented for TNT. That's why, it seems half the population wants to run around like headless chickens, panicking. What if we get hit? What if we get hit?
Yeah.
Because we're not accustomed to this. So I did say that we can't, for the government, and I'll say, at least to some extent, you kind of have to give all the politicians a little bit of a pass because they don't really know. That said, look, there's a whole massive Ramstein Air Force base in Germany. Did Germany lose its sovereignty? There's a base in Okinawa. Did Okinawa lose its sovereignty? You think the South Koreans want to kick out America from their bases in South Korea? Literally, I think there's a 4-star general in South Korea, a United States 4-star. So I could be wrong. There's one of the carrier battle groups is parked on a harbor in Japan. It's permanently stationed there. So it is what it is. That said, we have a comment to get to before we wrap up the show. So let's take a comment. The renewal penalties, this is with regards to licensing, right? I had a big disagreement with a call on this yesterday. The renewal penalties are preventative, encouraging people to renew licenses before they drive. And if you just go down, if there were no consequences for missing a renewal, people might ignore it until they're caught. There should be grace period or way for people to provide proof of likeness of being abroad so those with legitimate reasons aren't unfairly penalized. Here's my issue. At its core, the renewal penalty assumes I'm driving while my license is down. And not driving is not limited to traveling, right? What if my car was down for a month and I said, well, don't bother getting me a rental car. I'll just get, alternatives. What if it's like someone's wife or husband saying like, oh, well, I'll just get dropped, right? The thing is, in my mind, this is trying to prevent a crime with a fine that assumes if you run afoul of the fine, you are guilty of the crime. And procedurally, I have an issue with that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard, I'm not sure if it's a transport commissioner or a member from the Ministry of Transport and Civil Aviation, they mentioned that these fines were already there. They were pre-existing, but they're only now coming into effect. I'm not sure if I've heard correctly. I could be wrong.
Well, here's the trick with that. You could potentially make a case in the court, hey, this wasn't enforced for so long.
And this is where I'm coming back to reform, in terms of legislative reform. Because some of the figures, when we look at things, we saw that increases happened for the immigration division in terms of passports. We saw birth certificates and these certificates.
Which I had no problem with because they were small, and I would imagine the cost of administration would have gone up.
Passports are subsidized. Right? These things are subsidized. So the average Trinbagonian does not pay the full cost that the state bears, and our passports is one of the has some of the best security features in the world, by the way.
Now, let me try and make my case, because it's not just about the renewal fee. to me, it's a precedent of if we're going to have this thing where, one, we're going to basically almost assume everybody is guilty of the thing that we suspect people of doing. It might be widespread, but the assumption that everybody is blanket statement doing this is just not, I don't think it's healthy, right? And then now, there's also the fact that you're taking a law enforcement function and you're trying to regulate it via a late fee, as opposed to, well, if there's deficiencies with the law enforcement function, figure that out, because you're leaving those deficiencies there to fester. And people will find the loopholes if you leave the loopholes there to fester.
Of course, the fees, I mean, of course, they would have had whatever justification or however they came about to those particular amounts. I don't know why. I can't say how that would have happened.
But the fact that they didn't enforce the fee implies they themselves knew the issue of its existence in the first place.
Yeah, so I think that maybe, who knows, maybe there would be some amendment or adjustment made with the fees. But something that the person commented that I do agree with is that we take, as Trinidadians, we sometimes take advantage of the system.
Yes,
A simple example in terms of compliance, where you have a company, right? You have to file your annual returns and your documents and all of these things yearly. And there was a system where an amnesty was in place, and the person still did not take advantage of the amnesty. And then when penalties started being imposed, and the penalties once calculated, some penalties ranged in amounts, right? Because it's calculated based on how many times, at the time period you did not account for and did not file for. And persons took to social media to complain. But had you done what you were supposed to do, I think it's like, what, $50 to file annual returns? I could be wrong, but it's a very minimal fee. Had you taken advantage and done your statutory duty and filed what you're supposed to file any time period, you wouldn't be faced with a penalty.
I think part of it is you're kind of ambushing the wider public with these things without having some transitionary period. And then the other thing, one of the thing with the renewal fee, the caller brought up insurance. I'm like, well, the renewal fee, why aren't we looking at insurance? Because, hey, what if you're driving without a grace period? Your license, do you still have insurance coverage? Like, what about the insurance coverage aspects could we look at to improve? Because in my mind, this rarely comes into play if there's an accident. And I know you want to prevent an accident, but hey, you could get bad driving whether your license is renewed or not, right? So if someone has a lapsed license, they get an accident, they don't have insurance, in my mind, one of the things, although Karen Shisheri yesterday said that it's more complicated than just saying it, right?
Right.
That's what fines are for.
Renewal
fee, I don't like it. Much bigger fine because you caused an accident, right? And depending, of course, the fines could scale with regards to damage, with regards to injury, loss of life, or whatever. It will be a much higher figure, right? And I have no issue throwing the book at people that actually cause accidents, because then now, one of the things that is preventative, folks, that is really preventative, is consequences. And I don't just mean a fee, because I think there will be some people that take advantage of the fee. Or there's a fee, I'll just pay it.
I'll just pay it,
But if I have now, oh, well, you are convicted of causing an accident and you have to pay for repairing the car, repairing any other property damage, and then, of course, you have punitive fees and fines for the illegality of your conduct from the government just on a whole.
Well, I always say that we have laws that we can enforce, but we don't enforce. There are things that across the spectrum, not just in regards to licensing fees, but across the spectrum, there are consequences and there are things in place with current legislation for different issues. You look at it, but they are not enforced in terms of, if you look at littering, for example. I mean, there are enforcements that's specified in its schedule.
The thing is, the police can't be everywhere.
I agree.
Consequences can be felt.
Right. And this is my thing, is that
all the time.
Enforcement.
Well, and to be fair to the people who disagree with me, that is a legitimate concern, the enforcement of it.
I would say, though, me personally, seeing the fees, it made me check my vehicle. I did check my vehicle. Okay, make sure there's no things here, that, there, whatever. So I don't know if the government meant to have that effect in the sense of, okay, we're going to put this figure as the fee in the hopes of the John public now goes and does their due diligence. I hope not, but
You see, part of the problem is some people are in that situation because they literally can't afford it.
Yeah.
Right? And
so then maybe this is where the government listens to the ear of the public, has an ear for the public, and they say, okay, let there be some sort of forum or some sort of process where if you genuinely cannot afford or you have certain problems, there's an avenue for discretion to be made, a waiver of some sort.
The other problem is when you basically have a prize giving for police officers for giving out tickets,
yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter what you think the intentions are. The psychological effect is you have incentivized giving out tickets, right? And in the private sector, there are case studies where you incentivize the wrong thing, you will get the wrong outcome. You will get the unintended outcome, right? You might think, oh, well, technically they're doing a good job and you want to reward that. The problem is you start to incentivize it, and instead of seeing a reduction in offenses, that's supposed to be the goal, you see an increase.
And this is where there has to be accountability, because where the scrutiny in terms of, okay, you gave out 1,000, how many tickets in a certain period? But the tickets you gave out, where's this, is it that the only if you contest the ticket, now you have to go to court, and then we have an issue where police officers not going to court.
That's a whole other
But there's a whole other topic, but
I mean, to be fair, on an individual officer basis, I understand, like, you have expectations, there are a lot of tickets to give out. It's just, when you get onto the macro level, in theory, there are unintended and bad consequences, and that's my concern.
Do you know it is proven throughout the world, with law enforcement especially, there are instances where a person would not be an offender if you use the discretion and based on how you handle that situation.
We're supposed to have that here.
Well,
we're supposed to have that here. But one of the consequences of being over time is we have no more time. So thanks to the callers, thanks to the commenter, thanks for joining me, Nikolai. Once again, youth advocate. We didn't say we got youth things, but hey, maybe the Tobago elections was somewhat of a youth movement. That said, remember your leaders to the Republic. Stay safe. Be nice. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN